Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. Today we're going to be talking about RHEL System Roles, and we have no guest today, so it is just myself and the wonderful Scott McBrien.
That's
Scott, how you
true.
doing?
Doing good. You're burdened by only having me with you today, Chris. It's terrible.
I know. I mean, I wish for so many things in my life, but yet here we are.
Well, we are going to be doing live demo later, so hopefully that just goes up in total flames, and then
That's the idea, right? Like we're trying to just get people comfortable troubleshooting stuff, right? So yeah, live demos are great. So system roles, right? Like, well, first, is there anything follow-up wise that you want to touch from last episode?
No, we talked. Last episode was with John Spinks, and we're talking about management and insights. And I think we will touch on it a little bit when we start talking about system roles a bit, because they use Ansible, we use Ansible, and we really do Ansible together. Yeah, but I think we're in pretty good shape there. Yeah.
Cool. So system roles are not system purpose.
Right.
That is a good distinction to make.
Right. And when we were initially doing our setup for the show, we were talking about this a little bit, and you may recall that 2 or 3 episodes ago, we talked with Rich Dorito, and Rich Dorito was, we were talking about subscription manager. And then there's this affiliated tool called system purpose or syspurpose.
Right.
Syspurpose is used to identify this box is a production box or a test box or something along those lines. So when it registers with Red Hat Subscription Manager, it will look at the pool of available subscriptions in your account and choose one that it thinks is the best match, so that you're not tying a premium 24/7 support subscription to your dev box, right? It doesn't need that.
Yeah.
And so that's what syspurpose is to make better automated decisions on what subscriptions get pulled out of your account and assigned to individual systems as they register. System roles are using a technology included in the Ansible suite called Ansible roles.
Nice.
And they basically are like extensions for playbooks.
Okay.
So Ansible has a whole bunch of different things that they use to extend beyond just like their YAML and playbook infrastructure, right? They've got modules, they've got plugins, and they also have roles, and that's what system roles is. It's an Ansible role or implemented to Ansible roles.
Cool. So these are pre-baked, ready to go for me. Like, how do I start consuming them?
An excellent question. And it's one that I think we don't do a great job of answering in a lot of our materials. Like, we tell people what they are, like which ones are available. We never tell them how to use them.
Right.
And so when we get to the demo, I'll actually be showing like how it all hooks up into a playbook. But they are pre-made by Red Hat.
Cool.
There's actually an upstream project for them. And then what gets sent as part of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So as we're working on new ones, you'll see them appear in the upstream project prior to their appearance in Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Typically, when they appear in Red Hat Enterprise Linux, it's at a dot release of the product. So 8.3, for example, had a whole bunch of new ones that got added into RHEL that were pulled in from the upstream. If you look at the upstream today, there's a lot more kind of in flight there than what is available in RHEL today.
Right.
And we'll see what lands at different dot releases going forward. But for example, I know that they're working on one for the RHEL HA plugin or RHEL HA add-on.
Right.
So that you can do some configuration of your pacemaker clusters.
Nice.
And if you look at the upstream, there's not a lot there yet because it's still very much in development. So I would not expect that one to land in a recent release of RHEL, right? It might be a couple releases down the road.
And I just found it. They have a web page that kind of breaks down everything that's in the repo for you. including like, here's demos, here's currently supported ones, here's ones that are on the roadmap. So be sure to check that out if you're interested, right? So these are Ansible roles. Like I get them from Red Hat. I apply them on my system using Ansible, not RPM or Yum or anything like that. So do I necessarily need to buy Ansible support, or are these supported because they come with RHEL kind of deal?
Okay. So that can be a complex question. So let's go with the simple answer first, and then we'll see how far down the rabbit hole we go.
Okay.
So you don't need to buy anything beyond a RHEL subscription to use and consume RHEL system roles. Essentially, your RHEL subscription will also provide you access to an Ansible repo for the purpose of running system roles, so that you get a supported Ansible to run a supported feature of RHEL, which is system roles. If you're doing stuff outside of that, you may need an extra Ansible subscription. But for RHEL system roles, what comes with RHEL is what you can use. And then to actually get it going, we'll have to install the RHEL System Roles RPM, which gives you the Ansible role content. And then you also have to install Ansible so that you can run playbooks.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. So one step to get the thing, another step to actually execute the thing.
Yeah, and when we hit demo time, I'll actually start from like, here's how we subscribe to the Ansible repo. Okay, now let's install the pieces we need. So it's not too bad. It's like 2 RPMs that you need.
Yeah, so if folks are looking for the official docs, as far as like RHEL stuff goes, since we've talked about upstream, I'll drop those in chat. What, in your opinion, are like, I mean, this is your opinion, literally, I'm asking you now, what's your favorite system role? I mean, there has to be one where you're like, most people needs this.
It's a good question. So I like the session recording system role. It uses tlog as the backend and does the configuration for it.
Okay.
But it only applies to RHEL 8.
Ooh. Well,
let's see. I like the kernel settings system role. So it actually uses TuneD behind the scenes to apply changes to the system. But the reason I really like it is the automation piece that system roles gets, right? So I worked a lot of places where you would have a farm of boxes that are databases, and maybe, let's say MySQL. Somebody finds a document that says MySQL should have the swappiness value of the kernel set to 20.
Right.
So you go around, and as you're building all those boxes, that's what you do. And then you find another article from a more reputable source or more recently that says, no, that should really be 10, not 20.
Okay.
Well, in the olden days, you then ran around all the boxes and like did the needful on them. And now, if you had implemented a system role for that, you can literally just like update the playbook, execute the playbook across population. Done. So
okay,
that's why I like it. And system roles has kind of an interesting history of how it came about.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So originally it started because as we released new major releases of RHEL, right? So from 6 to 7, there was a lot of change that happened there.
Oh yeah, no, I remember that.
Right. Well, beyond systemd, like,
right,
we added in cronny, and we make different things the default things, even though we still ship older things. Right. So cronny is a good example where we have NTPD and cronny,
right,
and you get one or the other. And then when you go to RHEL 8, while I think the differential between 7 and 8 was not as large, you still get some of those technological changes.
Absolutely.
And so the original intention behind system roles was, let's provide a method that administrators could use to do something like set their NTP servers. Like
Right.
that's a pretty common thing to have across your population. What NTP server should they use? And so in 6, 7, and 8, those were potentially different methods of applying that change, different technologies, different files, and you had to know.
Yeah. I remember
So
having RHEL put out a nice like 6, 7, 8 like comparison chart between commands. I remember having to pull that out during those upgrade processes many times.
and we still have
It was,
that. It's
and it's
an
great.
article on
It's
the
a
customer
great
portal.
resource. Let me go find it before I forget about it.
But like from a customer perspective or from a administrator user perspective, that's super annoying because here you are, you've got this large fleet of systems on RHEL 6, and then RHEL 7 comes out, and now you have to know, oh, there's a RHEL 6 box, I need to do it this way. Oh, it's a RHEL 7 box, I need to do it this way. And when you're trying to use shell scripting, whatever else to automate, your shell script needs to account for that in its automation.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, you'd get the wrong stuff done on the wrong box. So one of the things with system roles is that when you use it, it is cross-RHEL capable. So, for example, date time sync system role is a good example of that. You can just put in the NTP servers you want your boxes to get, and if it's on RHEL 6, it does NTPD configuration stuff. If it's on RHEL 7, it actually checks to see whether you're using NTPD or Crony and does the right thing. And on RHEL 8, it uses Crony. So you can use the same playbook across those different generations of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and get a expected working output without having to worry about what's happening underneath. Same thing with like kernel settings. It works on 7 and 8. Same deal. And there is some like what roles are cross portable and which ones aren't is going to depend somewhat on when the role was added to the catalog. So for example, kernel settings was added in RHEL 8.3, and I believe it had also been added in 7.9. But RHEL 6 was already in maintenance phase 2, which means no new features, including system roles. So it was not put into RHEL 6. RHEL 7 has now crossed into maintenance phase 2, so we'll no longer be getting new features. So any new system roles we make aren't going to be backported into RHEL 7. And then there are some like session recording where that technology doesn't come with anything but RHEL 8 at this point. So if you run it on a RHEL 7 or 6 box, it's not going to do anything.
I cannot, in the access set, I cannot for the life of me find that PDF. I don't know if I'm searching wrong or not. But if you have it handy, I would appreciate that.
I can probably Google food that for you.
Well, I Google food it and I found 5, 6, 7. I did not find 6, 7, 8.
Oh.
So yeah. And I remember the 5, 6, 7 cheat sheet well. I don't recall there being one for 7, 8, 6, 7, 8. Sorry. Or 5, 6, 7, 8. So yes.
I see the 5, 6, 7 one.
Yeah. Maybe we didn't update that. Sorry for the dog.
Ah, here we go.
Oh, you found it? Good.
Maybe. Let me check.
All right.
Yes. Let me see if we can just put it in here betwixt ourselves. That's what happens when you have more than one box.
I know, right? Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yes, this is exactly what I was looking for. Cool.
Yeah, I still use that 5, 6, 7 web-based cheat sheet occasionally, but mostly because like, wait, 5 was 12 years ago. What did we do then?
Well, I'm thinking of the folks that are like changing jobs and they walk in to upgrade, a fleet of servers, and it's like, okay, I was using 7 and they're on 5 still, and I'm trying to get them upgraded kind of thing, right? Like I've been in situations like that. So having this cheat sheet really helps you. Like if you've been living in the future or the past, this can bring you up to speed kind of thing.
Yeah, My condolences to anyone who is working on a RHEL
Still
5
on
project
5.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, what was it, 2011? We were upgrading from RHEL 3 to 5 and just skipped over 4 or whatever, and was like, okay, that was fun. But then it became easier to upgrade because RHEL 5 made it easier, RHEL 6 made it easier, upgrades got simpler, we got more automation, so forth, so on.
Yeah. And I actually was just asked yesterday about 6 to 7 upgrades. And it's like, okay, so 6 is at extended life support phase. So very limited updates, essentially critical and important security errata only, with an add-on subscription. Right? So if you don't have the add-on, you don't get any updates anymore for it. RHEL 7 is in maintenance phase 2, so it's got, I don't know, 2.5 years left before it goes extended life support and end of life phase. So if you're going from 6 to 7, you're essentially buying yourself 2 years, 2.5 years, and they're going to be in the exact same situation again. It's like, if you're going to go through all that effort, maybe it's worthwhile to go through all that effort to get up to 8, which is currently in full support phase for another, let's see, year and a half.
I forget, but I did stumble across the lifecycle page when I was searching. So let me go find
it was released in 2019. So 2024 is when it goes out of full support and goes into maintenance support for another 5 years. So, I mean, you still got a lot of life left on RHEL 8. And we're doing work to make the transition between major versions easier. I don't know if we've talked about it before. I know in March, I think it is, we're going to have Terry Bowling on. He's the
cool.
And we're going to talk about Leap, which is the in-place upgrade utility.
Yeah.
So we're currently using that for 7 to 8. We're going to continue to use it for 8 to 9, but because the differential between 8 and 9 is not as great, it should be easier and smoother for people to use for 8 to 9.
Yeah, and it's like we've gotten way better point releases too, right? The whole release process, right? I feel the evolution, right? Like happening underneath me as I use RHEL, right? It's pretty great.
Yeah.
So, is there any other questions I needed to ask you specific to system roles? Let me double check here. We kind of touched on what needed to be installed. You needed the system role package as well as Ansible.
Yep.
This
is part of your RHEL subscription.
Right. This is part of RHEL. You don't have to buy Ansible. The purpose of system roles we kind of discussed.
We got sidetracked on that one.
Yeah, we did.
Sorry. It got started as that, like, let me have a slightly different administrative interface so that I don't have to care about version. So that as we had these major versions changes, you don't have to go through and update all of your scripting procedures, automation, right? It all just still kind of works. But out of that has generated kind of a new idea of what we could use system roles for, which is standard operating environment. So if you're going to set kernel settings across a segment of your population or your entire population, like, let's build it into a playbook that we apply to all our boxes. Or if you're going to set a specific configuration for NTP servers, or you only want to use the pool servers, or you only want to use the public but higher priority.
Right.
Yeah. Or you want to use your ISP one.
Whoever.
You can do that, and you can put it in your Ansible playbook using system role to apply it across. There are also some newer system roles that do administrative tasks. So like the storage system role, for example, you can create partitions on disks. You can add new logical volumes. You can extend logical volumes.
Nice.
So, but I will caution you that it is more utilitarian, it will provide you more benefit. Wow. I'm just like not using my words today.
Okay, Porky Pig.
It will, something like storage will provide you more value the more
Complicated,
the more
complex.
homogeneous
There you go.
your hardware is. So if all your hardware has the exact same disk layout, has the exact same number of disks, the exact same devices of disk, then the storage role is really, really handy, because you can execute that change and kind of know that across your population, that new partition is, one, going to be able to be made, and two, isn't going to clobber something else or do something wonky. So if you have a really disparate population of all random stuff, then that probably would not be the best choice to do.
Yeah, we had my first job out of the Air Force, we had different like classes of servers, and that's where I see that being helpful, right? Like if you have 20 batch processing boxes and they need this amount of storage and this much in temp and this much in, var, that is super helpful. But that could be something completely different in your database fleet or your web server fleet or whatever you're using. It just depends.
And maybe you have a standard operating environment that gets applied to a specific type of box. You have your web server SOE, you have your database SOE. But I worked for a large media conglomerate, and their process for acquiring new hardware was buying whatever was left over at the hardware manufacturer. So like,
oh, fun.
Yeah. So we would get things like DL280s, HP DL280s, but they would have different number of NICs, different amount of RAM, different number of cores, different disks. And so, while we could guarantee some basic sameness, like they're all going to be the same processor generation, or there was going to be a minimum amount of RAM that was in there, we wouldn't necessarily know the complete package before we got hands on it and deployed it out in the data center. And some things like NICs, you can't undo.
Oh, you can never guarantee. Yeah.
Right. Like I'll know it has at least two because that was in my spec when I put it out to be fulfilled, but it might have six. So yeah. Anyway, but fun times about standardization from the guy who used to work at Nest.
Nice. Okay, cool. So are you want to dive into this demo, or
Sure.
Because I feel like I'm going to ask many questions during your demo.
Absolutely. So let me just reprint it in this box here, and let me share my screen.
Screen sharing. Yeah.
Okay, so you should see it like currently provisioning.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Hang tight.
Yep. These boxes only exist for 30 minutes at a time. So, we're talking for 20 minutes. It would kind of suck if 10 minutes in the demo.
10 minutes in. Yeah.
All right. So this is a lab experience that I have not completed. If you ever used a lab from lab.redhat.com before, typically there's like a lot of pros in the instructions that tell you like why you're doing this step and what to look for in the output. I haven't gotten to that yet. So at this point, this lab is essentially like, click to run this command that might be super complicated and has no explanation of what it's doing. But here's the output. And there's no explanation of the output either. So we'll do that live on the demo here.
Cool.
The other thing I'd like to do with this demo is it's on a multi-node environment. So I'd really like to get it, once I've gotten all the instructional stuff ironed out, I'd like to get it so that we can apply the same playbook across all the hosts. So that's my plan. I had originally intended to have it completed by the end of 2020. You could see how that worked out for me.
Well, anything with the word 2020 in it as a goal, you should have tossed that out in March, right?
Fair enough. All right. So I said that the first thing we needed to do was make sure we have the right software. And part of that is getting access to the Ansible RPM that we need that provides the Ansible executable. So I'm going to use this subscription manager command to just enable the Ansible 2.9 repo for this RHEL box. It's included as part of your RHEL subscription. All you have to do is enable it, and then you're given access to the software that's contained within it.
Very nice.
Yep.
You can do a subscription manager, I believe.
I blame Rich Dorito.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. The next thing is installing the software you need.
Mhm.
So I'm going to install both the Ansible RPM and the RHEL System Roles RPM. And they'll pull in a couple of dependencies as well.
Of course, yeah. Oh, Python 3, that's a good one to pull in.
Yeah, they need that for the Ansibles.
Mhm. So I'm okay,
All right.
cool. Right.
So before we go further, I do just want to point out like where things are going.
Mhm.
So if we take a look at the list of files that were provided by RHEL System Roles, there's some documentation that's installed that's text-based. It's pretty basic. But here in user share Ansible roles, that's where the actual Ansible stuff that makes it work is. And so earlier we were talking about the differential between upstream and what comes as part of RHEL.
There it is.
Yeah, and user share Ansible roles. So these are the ones that come with RHEL. Some of them will be tech preview. So for example, the postfix one I know is tech preview. The other ones I think are all now fully supported. But that would be referenced in the RHEL documentation that you linked earlier, Chris.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in which ones are tech preview or not, you can find them there. And so inside these directories is all the Ansible-iness that makes the roles work with Ansible.
Cool.
Okay, so this is one of my in-development things that's not working right.
Awesome.
Yep, always. So I'm just going to copy and paste this content.
Fair enough.
There we go. All right. So this is a starting point that I wanted to have in the lab, especially because people may not be familiar with Ansible and how they would write a playbook. So I wanted to at least give them a starting point to kind of work off of.
Makes sense.
And what we can see is down here in the roles section, these are the RHEL system roles that I'm pulling into my playbook.
Okay.
So it's going to go out into
So terminal logging and kernels.
Right. And because I have imported these roles, that means that I can do these sections. So I can now reference the kernel settings syscontrol and tlog scope SSSD sections. And then underneath of them, I can define more variables. And you find out what those variables are in the documentation.
Nice.
It's craziness.
All
right. So kernel settings allows me to change stuff that TuneD can change.
Yeah. And TuneD is a great piece of software, right? Like,
agree.
Yeah. If you don't have TuneD in your environment, I would encourage you to look into it.
And I was just talking with Mike Jarrett over in the ISV team today about doing a webinar around developing TuneD profiles, specifically for people who are writing and distributing software in RHEL. Because I think that including a TuneD profile for your thing adds like that extra level of polish, and it's really not hard to do.
Right. Like I can totally see a database ISV being like, oh, here's our TuneD profile and everything else that we need, right? To make your thing perform, at a certain, performance level. Or maybe there'd be multiple profiles. So you could be like, oh, is this a high write? Is this just a read-only replica? Like, what is this? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Or they can at least give you a basic one.
Yeah.
And then if you need to customize it based off your use case, they can provide that in their documentation or something.
Absolutely.
Else.
Yeah. Like all of that sounds great to me. Bake that in,
all right.
folks.
There we
Seriously.
go.
Yeah.
So because I use this kernel setting system role and I'm now able to do these variables, I'm just going to set some parameters in the proxys directory, right? And that's what is happening here. So I'm going to change the swappiness value for this system. Swappiness is a value between 0 and 100 that determines the kernel's affinity for utilizing swap space. So 0, it's going to try really, really hard not to use swap space ever.
Ever. Like
right.
never.
As much as ever can be.
Right.
It won't be
until
disabled.
OwnKiller shows up.
Yeah. And we
right
can delve
before that,
into
I think.
the craziness there.
Yeah.
100, it's going to like try and use swappiness as much as possible, or swap space as much as possible.
Right.
And so for databases, typically you want this to be 20 or less, depending on the database, depending on the workload. You might be choosing between 10 and 20-ish. Along with that, I put in some other tunables for databases here. So in order to kind of wring as much performance as you can out of databases, a lot of the open source and enterprise databases also tell you to make some changes to how your cache is written and managed, your file cache is written and managed. And so the VM dirty ratio is don't sync file cache until it's 40% dirty, or 40% of memory is being used. The expire centisects and write back centisects. So when we decide that we need to do a sync of file cache, how long should it be until we decide that we need to do it? And so here we're saying that dirty pages expire in 500 centiseconds. And then trying to remember what write back is. It's another setting around kernel pages. It escapes me at the moment. And then the last one is the setting for semaphores. So semaphores are a type of shared memory where processes can pass information back and forth to each other. And so we're setting things like the size, the total number, the minimum and maximum length of semaphores. And it's a set of 4 values that get stuck in this one kernel setting.
Nice.
So, yeah, once I apply this playbook, those are the settings that are going to be applied to this system through system rules. The other one is one of the ones we talked about, is one of my favorites. This is session recording. It's based on a technology called tlog. And essentially with this variable, I'm saying, start doing session recording for everyone. So
why would you want to do that?
For everybody.
Just out of curiosity.
Okay, so same media conglomerate, whereas serving a professional services engagement. We had a team of administrators that worked there. And it was often the case that you would get a call at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because it was not 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning somewhere else in the world. And they need you to do something. And so here you are, bleary-eyed, getting out of bed, executing a change on the systems. And what if it goes haywire? So then maybe you need somebody with more experience. So you call an escalation. And that person receiving your escalation asks you a question like, what did you do?
You could just say, here you go. This is what I did.
Right. And so they can actually replay your session and see not only what you did in terms of what commands you ran, but also the outputs and errors that came from that.
Yeah, I was about to say the commands are only so good that you need the full output.
Right. And that's like, back then, we essentially would like pull up somebody's history and try to detangle things based off of their history that they used. But you're right, without the output and error messages, it gets really hard to figure out what exactly happened to that box. But looking at these recorded session, you get everything in context.
Nice.
And so not only did that help us, or would it help you detangle those situations and maybe repair them, but you could also then use it as a training aid to be like, look, here you ran this command and you received this error, right? And so this is what this error is telling you. And yeah, you can also...
Here's the next step to fix that. And then, like that's really cool. You could totally put together a program,
exactly,
around logging,
And it all happens through text logs. by default, it goes to the same logging provider is configured on the system. So for our boxes, by default, that'd be rsyslog, which means you can also collect those logs, not just from the individual boxes, but to a centralized logging host. So the other thing that is really handy for this is like maybe you're in a more secure environment and you need to make sure that things don't go bad. And if you allow someone to have root on an individual box, they could manipulate what's stored in their log after it happens. But if you simulcast it to the local log and a remote log server, you always have an unmangled copy on the log server compared with what's locally on the system. So,
and this would be for every single user, right? So like, let's say somebody's credentials got cracked, or, you know, somebody came inside the wire, you could then have an analysis on what's coming out of your logging service, your centralized logging service, if you have one, and say, hey, this isn't cool. Somebody just ran this command and, you know, who knows what happened. So that's very handy, I feel like, in larger environments, right? Like that could get to become a very useful thing.
Yeah. And depending on how large
I remember having to
is,
script these things out for myself sometimes, and like just having that output like in line, as opposed to here's the errors you might encounter as like a separate section documentation, right? Like you just roll through them all. That'd be cool.
Well, and you know, we've had this in previous versions of RHEL, kind of. You could do a whole bunch of gymnastics with the audit daemon and get a lot of the same data. But it would also do things like capture passwords, which you probably don't want.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it goes into the audit logs, which are different than the system logs, but still, like, you probably don't want that stuff. Whereas T-log and session recording are set up to like do this in a more sane way than just capture system events and report on it. Cool. But this is something that's in RHEL 8. It's not in previous versions of RHEL. There is actually a lab for it. So if you're really interested in it, you could go through the lab yourself on creating it. And playback, there's a command line playback utility called T-log play. Or there's a really, really sweet plugin for Cockpit or Web Console where you can get in a video, you can do Zoom. You can actually put in a search term, and because this is all stored in text, it'll highlight the time codes where that search term exists. Like it's really slick. So anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
All right, so pulling the train back on the tracks for system roles.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Now I see why it's your favorite, though. I mean, this is good to know.
Yeah, it's got a lot of use. All right, so I've got my initial one, and just to kind of see where we're at, if I look at the swappiness value on this box right now, it's set to 30. After I run my playbook, it should be set to 20. All right, so I'm going to just Ansible playbook SOE YAML, right, to execute my playbook. And you can see that it's going through and running different parameters. Yep, from kernel settings, and then it's going to move to T-log. And then it should be completed at that point. All right, with T-log, I didn't have the software installed for it. So up in here, where it talks about package facts and then installing the session recording plugin, like that's actually installing all the software you need to make that happen. That's built into the system role for
very cool
for session recording. All right, so as expected, when I look at the swappiness value now, it's up to 20. And let me just real quick reset my password for this user.
Oh, it has to be.
All right. And when I connect to the local system, right, session recording was installed. It's
there you go.
Users, it's reporting that my session is being recorded.
Session recording cannot go back in time, is what I'm hearing, right?
What do you mean?
This is something you have to install before.
Oh, correct.
You get the benefits of it.
It's for any new session after it's been installed and configured that it'll pull it into your logs, right? And just to round out our discussion there, what is it? T-log. It's secure.
Oh yeah, I think it's secure.
I don't think it is.
It's not.
I don't know. If we have time at the end, I'll pull that one up and we can do that one too. All right. All right. So that's like we created a playbook. We set our parameters. We told it which roles to use so we could know what parameters to use. And then we executed it and the parameters were applied to the system. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same YAML file and I'm just going to make some changes to it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another role to it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to do things in the playbook for kernel settings, for T-log, and for time sync.
Nice.
And then this is a super complex command, but essentially what it's doing is it's a clickable so that I can shove stuff into the playbook without making you type it and mistype it.
Yeah.
All right. So
not as easy as you think.
Right. So when I executed it, right, there was my addition of the new role that I want to use, time sync. And then that said inline edit added this section.
Got it. Nice.
Where currently on this box, it's probably set up to use a bunch of NTP pool servers.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I have very specific ones I want to use. So I'm going to use time.nis.gov box and then one out of the pool as like a backup. All right. In reality, you probably want 3, maybe
or 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Well, kind of depends on your need and sensitivities and such to time.
Right. So if we look at our Crony sources right now, right, these are all pulled out of the pool. And what are there? 3, 6, 8 of them. But because they're pulled out of the pool, notice they're like stratum 2, 3. I've seen ones that
you have
like
no
5,
idea.
6. Yeah. Right. Whereas I know timedb.nis.gov is a stratum 1, right? It's like connected to the clock. All right,
we could do a whole show on time and
let's not
/NTPD and so forth, but yeah, we shouldn't.
But let's not, because it's super boring.
Oh, come on. I love time. It's fun. So to be honest, I was the guy that said, hey, we probably should get a GPS time receiver since we're a news company at first job out of military kind of deal, because there's all sorts of system timing issues. And I was like, hello, have y'all heard of NTP? It's like, oh yeah, we should do that. It's like, well, we should get our own time source too that we can trust and then have backups, right? So yeah, we actually
like the NIST servers oftentimes random clients aren't permitted to connect to them, right? They'll only accept connections from a list of known servers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be one of those, you need to like fill out an application and review it and decide whether they want to do it. So if you were, say, I don't know,
a large vendor of some sort that wanted to maybe add all of your systems, tens of thousands of them.
Well, and yeah, that would be a no,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. But if you were like a large news organization where time is important, right? When you're like time stamping the publication date on articles or on news stories or whatever, you could register maybe 3 boxes as an organization to that. And then inside you use those 3 boxes. Anyway. All right. Enough on time, Chris Short. Super boring. Stop it. All right. So I'm just going to apply my updated playbook. And it's basically going through and running all the same things. And it should be reporting mostly OKs and skips because it's not doing anything except the time stuff.
Yeah.
So especially when you get down to T-log, right? It's already installed. It's already configured. We didn't make any changes. Should be good. All right. So now we're installing Crony and making changes based off Crony. All right. Now this part of the output here.
That makes sense.
Right. It makes sense. But if you are a person who's used to looking at red and green, and red is bad, it's bad.
This is okay.
Right. But in reality, this is okay because what it's done is I said earlier that we go across different versions of RHEL. Some versions of RHEL have NTP, some have Crony, some have both, which we're using. And so essentially in here, we're looking to see what's configured. And then based off of the configuration, we're making the changes. But it's actually checking and failing because it's not there.
Right.
I know that there is a open feature request with system roles guys and gals to change it so that this is simply a skipped or an ignoring without the red error messaging.
So this is actually a thing in Ansible, right, where you can accept a failure, right? Like a failure in this thing does not mean an entire failure of the whole process. It could just be a failure to check that the thing is actually there. So I'm not going to continue down that role or down, some other role that it needs to pull in. It'll, in theory, quote, skip over it, but it's not skipped because you have to check something with Ansible to actually skip it. So therefore it's failing to see the presence of something. So therefore it ignores it and continues on because it's not a failure that is detrimental to what you're trying to do.
Right. But if you're just scanning the output, that would attract your attention.
You might,
even though it's expected.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, like disable time master, right? If you don't know what time master is, you'd probably be like, oh, what is that? And then you get to learn about time.
Well, time master, yet another service that one could use to manage time.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, if I check my Crony sources again, right, there's my two that I said I wanted. One is time.nist.gov and the other one is random out of the pool. All right, just like my playbook said.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when you want to make changes, right? I said earlier, maybe you set up your database servers so that they use 20, and then you read this other article and it says you should use 10. So you're like, all right, cool. Boom. There we go. I'll make the change. Right. That little in-place edit.
Mm-hmm.
Just updated that guy. And then once you've made your change, you apply the playbook again. Yep. And just like before, it skips all the stuff that it had already done and is still the same state. And then applies the new changes or the differentials. So now we shouldn't see time servers being set or changed or anything like that because it's already been done. It hasn't been updated in the playbook.
Has not been mucked with, correct.
Right. So by adding more roles into the roles section, you all of a sudden get to add more content into the variable section to customize different settings on your box.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So no surprise there that our change is actually done. Yep. So that's basic system roles.
Mm-hmm.
So let me pull up that YAML file one more time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can also do.
This is an Ansible playbook, and with variables and everything else defined, it's awesome. Yeah.
Right. And so the documentation that's provided tells you about the layout. I find it easier to read from the upstream system roles project because it's like, I pull up the GitHub, I click on it, it gives me the markdown based description of it. That's a little bit easier to read than a text file on the terminal.
Yeah, and you kind of get the hierarchy and everything, right, is there for you as well.
Right.
And if you have the awesome extension for GitHub called Octocat, it will show you on the side where this thing would live in your infrastructure, which is super cool.
Nice. Because I use some really simple system roles here. The ones like storage or logging configuration are a lot more complex and have a lot more variables and nuance to them. And so the documentation becomes much more key when working with those guys.
Yeah. No, the amount of things that you can check and do and the safeties that you can put in with Ansible are just vast. So yeah, I would be interested to find, and I'll probably look after the show, the most complex system role, right? And just like highlight that on Twitter somewhere. So yeah.
So I think a good place to look would be storage and logging.
Yeah.
If I just, wanted to throw a couple out there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, kernel could get complex, but that depends on your variables, right? Like,
well, kind of, but not really, because it's really using Tundi. And so Tundi has an already established syntax that it uses. So for example, For these, in the documentation, it just says use the syscontrol tunable, right? And that's what I'm using, and tell me what to set it to. So if I wanted to change, I don't know, make this machine a router, right? To turn on IP forwarding.
Mm-hmm. Testing with molecule. This I got to see. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Cool.
Shall we run it? Let's see.
Go ahead. See what
All
happens.
right, let's see if I remembered it.
Cool.
Proxys IPv4 IP forward. All right, so it's currently turned off.
Yep.
How good is the typing?
Time will tell.
I know you're super impressed that I remembered that path.
I am actually, to be honest with you, because I would have had to have like tabbed like 6 or 7 times to figure it out. And network forwarding is not something that I always did when I was administering Railbox.
Well, yeah. I mean, unless it's routing between networks, there's really no need. But for a number of years, I worked as a. There it is. Cool. So it's it. I worked as a Red Hat instructor for training and certification.
Nice.
And we needed to route between networks. And after you did your setup, you went in and you twiddled this bit. Or if things weren't working properly, you would check this value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there you go.
That's awesome. Like, this is very, like, I really like system roles. Like, at first, it wasn't really, I was ambivalent to them, right? Like, I've always been the type that's like gone to Ansible Galaxy and grabbed my role or playbook and, scoop it up from there and kind of tune it and tweak it. Now, having these like absolute rock solid roles, I'm probably going to refer to these more often as good documentation,
Yeah, and like we're continuing to grow the catalog of roles. So I know that we're in development on one, like I said earlier, for the HA add-on. There's one for firewall settings. There is one already out there for SE Linux because, like, let's make sure it's enabled.
Mm-hmm. Don't make Dan Walsh cry, folks.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a bunch out there kind of circling. We're starting to add some for specific things, like you may have noticed the certificate role that was added in with IDM for either 8.2 or 8.3.
Okay.
And so how you have to manage your SSL certs, and if they expire, it's like really bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that system role can manage certificates that are issued either from a CA, a local CA, or through the CertMonger service, which is part of IDM.
Yeah. This is cool. I just pulled up the GitHub repo. This is like everything you would possibly need. I wish I had this 5-6 years ago.
Exactly.
One of the last projects I worked on before I moved up here to Michigan, we actually had to like standardize web server configuration for like hundreds of hosts, and that meant SSL certificates too. And this would have been super helpful.
Right. Well, and getting things like a wildcard certificate just simplifies stuff so much.
Yeah.
Which back in the day we didn't have.
Yeah. I mean, we were using a vendor at the time, but we were like seriously considering switching to Let's Encrypt, which if you haven't by now heard of Let's Encrypt, please go look it up because it could save you a lot of time and money. So cool. Anything else you want to talk about as far as system roles go?
No, I think we're good. Did we get any questions or we're good?
No, there's a lot of, affirmation that, this is helpful.
Yay!
So you're doing well.
I like affirmation.
Yeah. Always a good thing.
Yeah. So next show, we're going to have Terry Bowling on. He's a product manager for RHEL. He's moving between product experiences. So System Roles actually were his, and he's handing it over to a new product manager. Cockpit and Web Console were his, and that's going to go with the new product manager. He's also the product manager for Image Builder that he's going to retain. And he's picking up Leap for in-place upgrades and Convert to RHEL for converting from other RPM-based Linuxes to RHEL. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to have him on. I think we're talking Convert to RHEL. Nice. And then he'll come on again in April, maybe, to talk Leap, because so the new RHEL cadence is minor release every 6 months, major release every 3 years. So RHEL 8 was released in 2019 in the spring. Guess what's happening in the spring of 2022? RHEL 9. So yeah, it's like in April, right about a year till we can expect RHEL 9. Let's talk about in-place upgrade, because as we talked about already in this episode, right, RHEL 7 is getting to be a short timer, and RHEL 8, RHEL 9 is where you're wanting to be. Yeah. So Terry will be on in the next episode and a few episodes past that. And I'm going to be better about booking guests, Chris Short, because.
Oh, you're fine. Did you not like just the 1-2 tandem? I mean,
just the two of us. Just the two of us.
So it was so lovely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. So cool. So folks, this is it for streaming for today. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in throughout the show, throughout the day today. Stick around, subscribe to the calendar. If you have not already, we have a calendar of events that you can subscribe to and know every show that's coming up in the future, including brand new ones that we're launching this year. We have one on DevSecOps coming up, and we have an EU-based show that will be a morning coffee break kind of show for the EU. So I will be asleep. The show will be happening. So yeah, stay tuned, and you will have more fun Red Hat things to watch. So thank you, and we will see you all next time. Stay safe out there.